Well, welcome to York in the beautiful setting of York Minster. With me is M.J.Trow, one of the biographers of Knut. What's the name of your biography?
Knut, Emperor of the North.
Emperor of the North. That makes him sound really grand, doesn't it? And we're also joined by Dr Charles Insley, Senior Lecturer in Medieval History.
That's right.
Fantastic. And Charles, if I could start with you, why has this text brought us to York?
Well, so the text we're going to be looking at in a moment is the only copy we have of a letter in the name of Knut, written for Knut, addressed to the English in around about 1020, in which he promises to be a good and firm lord and protect the English. Mm-hmm. And it's one of our first times we can see an English king addressing the English political nation.
Well, there's lots there to unpack, isn't there? But you mentioned that this is a letter from Knut, so if we can start by finding out what brings it to the beautiful surroundings of York Minster.
Well, it's copied into this remarkable manuscript, the so-called York Gospels. These are a set of Gospels written in around about 990, probably in Canterbury, and then brought to York, possibly by Archbishop Wulfstan himself on his promotion to York from London. So this letter has been copied into this sacred book, I think, to preserve it, but also to kind of almost sacralise it.
Well, we should better get looking at it then. Can we go through and see what else is in there?
So, classic gospel book. Each gospel has a carpet pages, beautifully ornate, decorated pages, and we go through each gospel. St. Mark and St. Luke. Then the Proclamation.
Absolutely, and it is one of the oldest surviving English text documents.
There are some from slightly earlier, from the 8th and 9th centuries, but this is still one of a relatively small number of documents or books that survive from before Norman Conquest.
So what makes this one special?
Well, because this is, Knut is a conquering king, and this letter is written in late 1019, early 1020, to the English after 4 years of absolute tumult and chaos. And it's essentially Knut saying, English and Danes, I will be a good lord to you. There's a phrase he uses here. And I will hold to Godes Richtung, and to Richt Warlage, and to God's law and secular laws. This is Knut promising to be a good king to his subjects.
That sounds like something that you'd expect lots of kings to want and to do, so is it?
Well, one would imagine yes, but this is the first time we see it in words. A king essentially almost entering into a contract with his people. And it's interesting that he talks about English and Danes. This is the English people can be multi-ethnic.
Mm-hmm. So Maya, I know in your biography you talk about Knut's conquering of the land. So how did it actually look before he got here?
Well, what you have is very much a disparate country. There really is no such thing as England, nothing like a single nation at all. We have 7 Saxon kingdoms, and even then you have subdivisions within those 7. So it's very much a fragmented situation. With local customs, local laws, local rulers, and conflict and tension between them. What Knut does is to weld that lot together. He didn't do it alone by any means, and there is already a movement under Alfred for that to start. But what he does with these laws, talking about the English and the Danes, is to create a single homogeneous group, and shows how the country is developing into what we might refer to as a single nation state.
And we were talking earlier, weren't we, about how some of the country was the Danelaw. I think you sort of divided up, don't you? Did they actually call themselves the Danelaw back then?
That's a more recent term. There's certainly references in 4 Edgar, so the Law Code 4 Edgar, and in the Law Code 3 Ethelred to the law of the Danes, Danish Shalag. So people are very conscious of a legal boundary in this part of the country. The legal customs are going to be different, the legal language is different. The language in which you talk about the sort of subdivisions of the landscape is different. In Yorkshire they don't have hundreds, they have wapentames as a kind of basic unit of local lordship. So there's a real division there.
So what this letter is doing, can we say, is sort of uniting the two systems in a way?
Well, that would be my reading of it. I don't know whether Charles would agree.
No, I think this is Knut appealing to English people of different heritages, I think is the way of looking at it.
Yeah.
These are all subjects of the English kingdom, but they're of different, they might have different senses of identity, what that actually means, and Knut is appealing to them both.
I can see a huge change in the man's personality, his grasp. You know, he starts up as a Viking thug, ends up as a ruler who really wants to do the job well.
Well, before we go into how that might have happened, let's just see if we can find the evidence for this, because we've hopefully got it in front of us here.
So it starts with a kind of standard letter address. Knut King greets, so it's the archbishops, his archbishopess, and all his kingdom, all his theodship. And it says here 1200 and 200, so that's high and low, that's the kind of, this is a socially, making quite a social comment there. And I say to you, I will be there, I suppose, strong Lord. So it's a kind of subtle comment on, you've not had that really, have you, recently?
You said that this is one of the first times, or the first time, we've seen a sort of contract between the monarch and the people. Would this also therefore be the first time we've seen this sort of language?
I think so. I mean, there's, in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle in 1014, it's after Svein Forkbeard's death, it says the Witan accepted Ethelred back if only he would govern them more justly than before. So there's that sense there, but we don't see what it looks like. Whereas this here, we actually have a king essentially negotiating almost, or setting up to say, I will be a good lord to you. I will hold to the laws, and I will protect you. And he talks about here, further down, if anyone, layer ecclesiastical, Danish other English, goes against God's law, against my kingship, and against secular law, then, I will sort that out.
So, I mean, it sounds very harsh. He's basically saying everybody is subject to the law.
Yes.
But it also sounds like he's doing his best to really include everybody in this. So
that's right. I think he's building bridges, really,
yes.
isn't he? There is a purge. He does wipe out his key opponents after Ironside's death. They are removed. Then it's his chance to build new men, a new start, really.
Yeah.
So just to just give us a little bit of a point of comparison, I guess, it's about 50 years later, we have the Norman invasion. What does William do differently?
The striking thing is there are clearly new men who come with Knut, and there are new big men who emerge out of Knut's reign, but there are also lots of Englishmen still in important positions of power and lordship. By 1086, there are hardly any Englishmen in the top tier of English society. They're all Normans or Bretons or Flemings, but mostly Normans. So there's been a wholesale change in that ruling elite, which there isn't after 1016.
So I just want to pick up on something that you said earlier then, Mike, when you were talking about this being sort of the first time you get a political entity of England. And obviously England is very clearly mentioned there. Is this then the first time we see this word being used in a political text?
I would say it's certainly a political text.
Yeah.
I mean, the homilist and cleric Elfrich uses the phrase Englaland in the 990s. But this is the first time we see it in connection with a kind of political community. This is Englaland.
So where did the word English come from then?
In the early 10th century, Saxon is actually probably the most common term to describe what we would call English. And that's certainly how outsiders saw the English. So that in both Welsh and Scottish, famously, the word for an English person is essentially Saxon, whether it's Saeson in Welsh or Sassenach in Scottish. But so at some point, the Anglicuna, as Alfred the Great calls them, becomes the more dominant form of identifying these people.
Which is interesting, because Alfred himself was a Saxon. So
yes, West Saxon. Yes.
And we know as well that Alfred was very religious. So could it have been that this idea of Alfred had to sort of bring his people together with the Angles to beat the Danes back into the north? He was sort of attaching a religious purpose to being... So it really fits for me then that what you were saying earlier about Elfrich using the word England, it kind of makes sense that it would first appear in those texts in that sort of context, like the kingdom of everybody who is a Christian on the island of Britain is basically what it's saying, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then Knut is sort of solidifying that and saying, okay, well, this is a kingdom where everybody who lives here, high, low, English, Dane, you're all subject to this law. You're all on the same side. So while I'm out in Denmark, don't start fighting with each other. Would you say that that's how he's ending here?
I mean, there's, in particular here, you've got this instruction. And each beode ealum mina yerefum. So I'm telling my reeves, my officials, if they want to maintain my friendship, they have to be fair and just. Sweet and mild heordness, a mild of heart. They're not to oppress the people. The sort of thing you would later find in a coronation promise.
Yes, that's right.
I mean, there are parallels between this and Henry I's coronation promises in 1100.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a development from Edgar's...
Very much so. And Knut's legislation, partly because it's the longest legislation, the longest body of Anglo-Saxon law we have, is the model that's used post-1066. It's Knut's laws they look to, that Henry I certainly looks to in 1100.
And is he effectively then closing off what Alfred started?
Yes, except that you've got the European dimension as well.
Yes.
The Emperor of the North thing. You've got Denmark, you've got Norway, you've got part of Sweden, which was never part of Alfred's brief. So it's bigger than Alfred.
Knut is also a European player. He attends the coronation of Conrad II in 1027.
That's right. Yeah.
Only English king, I think, to attend an imperial coronation.
Yeah.
His daughter is married to Conrad's son. Now, unfortunately, the daughter dies before children can happen, but there's that tantalising prospect of Knut as the grandfather of a Holy Roman Emperor.
That's right.
Well, there is lots there for us to pick up on later on in the project, and the conversations that I'll be having with Mai down in Cambridge and Charles down in Oxford. We'll look at Wulstan, we'll look a little bit more at the Normans, but we can see already we've got a king of England, we've got an England, and he is trying to include everybody in a sort of sense of fairness. So we very much hope you'll join us then for those. In the meantime though, Mai, Charles, thank you ever so much.
Thank you,